Is there anything that says spiritual community more than a potluck? I know some of you might not like that shared buffet style eating, but for me, they're an opportunity to have variety that I wouldn't get otherwise. I really like variety, and I get to eat special foods that I enjoy, but I wouldn't normally make. And at potlucks, we all get a richer, more satisfying meal in our sharing than we would have gotten to have at home alone. Similarly, the time, talent, and treasure that we share in community makes for a more rich and satisfying life for us all. You've probably heard this idea of time, talent, and treasure. Sometimes I hear those words so fast that I can't quite process them all. So time, so taking time, which might mean that you come to UUC and you work in the garden beds, as Chris Mueller so often does. Or it might mean that you take the time to make a phone call and reach out to somebody. Talent. Some of you are wonderful singers or artists, or have the skills of how to take care of buildings, and the AV tech folks. We have lots of different skills in community, and so talent refers to sharing those skills with the community. And then treasure refers to our financial gifts that we can give to the community. And all of us offer different things, and we show we care for one another in different ways. Obviously, right? In a family, we need someone to make the food. We need someone to clean the toilet. We need someone to fix the gutters, and someone to read the time story. Each of us recognizes different things as caring, and often that's based on what we most need and want. If we open up our definitions of what we consider caring, this can help us to acknowledge the contributions that others are making in our homes, in our workplaces, in our friendships, and in our communities. Looking for what others are providing helps me to feel more grateful and dispels any sense of being alone. If I look for it, I can see people caring everywhere. I want to explore this a little more thoroughly, though, because caring is often not simple. I was at a conference recently where I was responsible for some of the behind the scenes setup. I was at the podium preparing for the next presenter, and one of the attendees came up and offered to explain to me how the sound system worked. We were several days into the conference, so I knew how to use the sound system, and he'd seen me using it, but he wanted to give me a more in-depth lesson on the actual physics behind how the sound system worked. Now, I hope by this point in our relationship, you understand that I love learning. What you might not know is that I can get excited about learning practically anything. However, at this point, I was trying to prepare for the next speaker. So I told this gentleman that I was focused on preparing for the next speaker. When he continued, I explained that I don't interact with sound systems enough to remember what he was telling me and have it be useful in the future. And he said, well, I'm going to tell you anyway. So he set about explaining the physics underlying the workings of the sound system. To someone observing, it may have looked like he was being helpful to me by teaching me about the sound system. From my perspective, though, he wasn't supporting me in a need that I had. Rather, he had a need that he wanted to have filled by me listening to him. Now, I was frustrated in this situation, but I also had some compassion for this guy because I've been on both sides of this. I've been the one offering something that the other person didn't really want or need. If I want to buy a gift for someone, and this is just an example, if I want to buy a gift for someone and the only thing on their wish list is an Amazon gift card, do I get them what they asked for? Or do I preference my desire to give them something more personal and meaningful for me? If I chose the latter, who am I caring for in giving the gift? Am I giving the gift for my own needs or to be caring for them? Even in my job here, coordinating lifelong learning, I have to be careful and ask myself, okay, am I gearing up to offer this program because I'm excited about it and want to offer it, or because people have expressed an interest and I think it would serve the congregation? To further complicate things, when someone expresses what they want, offering it might not be the most caring thing to do. There's the parent who gives the teenager money for their date, and there's the parent who expects the youth to earn the money. When is it the most caring thing to pick someone up and cradle them after they've fallen? And when is it the most caring thing to say, oh man, that looks like it hurt. Here, take my hand. Let's keep going together. I think the most satisfying experiences of offering and receiving care are when everyone is getting some of their needs met. I often see this with those who choose to work with children and youth. It can definitely take some sacrifice and effort to get out of bed early and arrive to set up. And then as things get more and more exciting, to take that deep breath and take that deep breath when things feel a little more chaotic than might be comfortable. But then oftentimes when I'm working with children and youth, I realize in the midst of it that I'm feeling more alive. I'm feeling more present. And then one of the kids will say something brilliant that leads me to have a conversation with a loved one that I wouldn't have had otherwise. This morning, I want to highlight the pastoral associate team and how they care for this community. The pastoral associates, or PAs, offer caring presence for UUC members and friends, especially those who are going through a difficult time. While there are times when it's important to try to fix a problem, certainly we care about social justice and we understand that people have material needs. Generally, the PAs understand that they can't fix what you're going through, at least not in that moment, but rather they can offer some companionship, a reminder that you're not alone. That's what they offer, that kind of caring. Pastoral associates are also here for you in times of joy. You might have family, friends, and coworkers who are glad to join in with you in your joy, and you might not feel like you need to add one more person into the mix. However, sometimes we can feel alone even in our joy or excitement. I think about, for instance, a friend of mine who in her late 30s, when she hadn't found a lifelong partner that she was looking for, decided to have a child independently with artificial insemination. While intentional single parenthood is becoming more common, some people still have negative judgments about it. So even if being pregnant is thrilling, it can be lonely too. There are lots of joys that are complicated to share or that might not be taken as joys for others around us. Following our dreams can be this way. I think of the person who goes to grad school at age 50 to change careers and who is told by their family and friends that it's not a financially prudent thing to do, that they should just write out their current work to retirement. I was glad to hear Dr. Jane Fleischman say at our adult learning session last week that going back to school late in life was great. She mentioned specifically that you have so much life experience to bring to the study and integrate into what you're learning. While folks should go into more schooling with eyes wide open to the financial implications, I've seen a lot of good of people going back to school later in life. But maybe given my title as Transitional Director of Lifelong Learning, you might guess I have some biases. I'll give you just one more example. A couple of weeks ago, the Tampa Bay Times ran a series following police recruits as they went through the training academy and started their first jobs as officers. One recruit said her dad kept telling her that she could still become a realtor. So again, people have different ways of expressing their caring, and our pastoral associates are here for you with the joys or the sorrows that you may like to have somebody to share them with. The pastoral associates are representatives of the community. So they're taking on a really special role. And I want to make that clear while I've got a captive audience here, kind of. So they have a really special role where they take your confidentiality, they maintain confidentiality in order to give you the space to share what you need to share. Now, there are some instances where they wouldn't maintain that confidentiality, such as if you express that you might hurt yourself or somebody else, or if you in some way were to be abusive toward them. These things we hope would not happen, but I just want to be clear that there are exceptions to that general rule of confidentiality. But I want you to be really, to feel really comfortable that we have a great team that takes what you share and holds it as sacred. I anticipate that we'll return to the Octagon, your sanctuary, this fall. And yet to be determined, but that's what I'm anticipating. And for some of us, it's not a return, but rather a new experience. Several individuals and families have connected with UUC and started attending since we've been doing Zoom worship. I'm one of those people who hasn't gotten to experience the worship in the Octagon yet. And we also have people for whom Zoom gatherings were not a good fit. These people we haven't seen in a while because they haven't been joining us on Zoom. And some of them will be joining us again after a long hiatus, and we'll be glad to have them back. The congregation and the community that will gather together in the Octagon this fall is not the one that left the Octagon in March 2020. I know this is obvious to some of you, but I think it's important to say. We've had a lot of experiences in the last year and a half that have reshaped us. Our lives were seriously disrupted, plans put on hold, some dreams lost altogether. Parents, spouses, a child have died. We've learned different ways of being and connecting, and that learning will continue for months to come. I want to highlight one of the ways that we can be caring as we reconnect in the Octagon. So I'm a pretty affectionate person, and many of you, like me, have felt starved for touch with, having to socially distance for all this time. But there are also those who were overjoyed to be freed from the discomfort and sense of intrusion from touch that they didn't want. And one of the ways that we can show caring as we move forward is not to assume that others want hugs or even handshakes, but to be communicative and ask what people are comfortable with. Perhaps we'll even have some sort of system like name tags, having a red light, yellow light, green light system or something like that. So I just invite you to, especially as we're taking this time of reentry, to consider the ways that you show caring and how you can be even more intentional about that. Back to potlucks. Potlucks are often better if there's some organization behind it. If no one coordinates, we could get lucky and have a really balanced meal, or we could end up with 80% of the table covered in desserts, which you might like that, but some of us both like our healthy food and our sweets. Now, whether it's a real potluck or a potluck of our gifts of time and talents, it's important that we look for the intersection between what's needed and what we have to give. That we sometimes give in ways that are a stretch. And it's also important that we sometimes ask for what we need from others. Prepare for the day when we'll be back in the octagon. Let us consider closely how we care for one another.